Good afternoon, learners. This is the TV-based instruction, a program of the Division of Davao de Oro where education continues at your respective television. My name is Jonathan A. Urgel, your science teacher for this session. For the guidance of our audience, this episode is for Grade 4 Science. Please be informed that after this session, you will learn to identify and describe the kind of materials that float and sink. Identify and describe the materials that undergo decay. Describe and classify materials based on the ability to absorb water. And classify the materials that undergo decay. Every day, you use different kinds of materials. Your books and your school supplies, the food that you eat, the tools you use, all of them are made of different materials. Let us try to find out how well you know about the properties of matter by answering the following questions found on page 5 of your module. After honestly answering this, you may check the answers at the last part of this module. Please turn your module on page 7, particularly on the Let Us Study part. For this activity, let us tickle our mind by answering the puzzling questions to be solved by guessing the right answer. You may now answer Activity 1, which is entitled Riddle Time, Activity 2, The Word Bank, and Activity 3, Let's Do It. Again, after honestly answering this, you may check the answers at the last part of this module. Since you have now an idea of our topic, let us now proceed on the Let Us Practice part found on page 9. For this activity, let us conduct a classification of materials based on their physical properties. You may now start answering Activity 1A, which is entitled Classifying Matter According to the Physical Properties, and Activity 1B, Classify the materials on how they absorb water, float, sink, and undergo decay. Again, after honestly answering this, you may check the answers at the last part of this module. Did you get the right answers? Are there objects that have 2 or 3 answers? Very good. Now, let us have a conclusion. Why are classifying materials important? It is important to classify materials in order to know their properties and their uses. In the next activity, you will learn how to classify and familiarize things found at home that have the property to absorb water and those that cannot absorb water. Open now your module and answer Let Us Practice More on page 10. Take note that your answers will be rated according to the rubrics given found on page 11. Good job! You have done classifying the absorbent and non-absorbent materials. Now, let us know more on absorbency of water. There are different materials in our environment that can be classified according to their observable properties. Materials can be classified based on their ability to absorb water. Absorbent materials are normally seen in objects with a lot of holes that allow liquid to get inside the materials and occupy the spaces in it. Some materials can absorb water more than others, like cotton, sponge, cloth, paper, and foam. Some examples of absorbent materials are cotton, tissue, blanket, shirt, and sponge. Plastic bottles, ceramic plates, metal spoons, rubberized fabric, and glass are examples of waterproof materials. These are the materials that do not absorb water. These materials do not allow air or liquid to pass through. Here are some examples of non-absorbent materials: plastic bottle, porcelain plate, rubber gloves, and glass. Now that you know how materials absorb and do not absorb water, here is another way to classify materials by grouping them based on the ability to float and sink. Now, answer activity entitled Ability to Float and Sink found on page 12 of your module. Do you know what makes objects float or sink? Let us find out what makes objects float or sink. Objects with tightly packed molecules are denser than those where the molecules are spread out. Density plays a part in why some things float and some sink. Objects that are denser than water sink, and those less dense float. When an object floats, it pushes water out of the way. As you can see in the picture, some objects floated and some sank. Do you know the similarities and differences in the characteristics of the materials that you think affect floating or sinking? Now, let us know its differences and similarities. Materials made of plastic float. Materials made of glass sink. Materials made of rubber float. Materials made of metal sink. Materials made of wood float, while materials made of cement sink. But why some fruits float and some sink? Some fruits are less dense than water or light enough to float. Some fruits look big, float, others sink. One of the biggest factors here is the density. Congratulations! You have one step ahead in doing your activity. Let us learn more on how properties of matter float and sink as seen in the aquarium. Sink means to fall at the bottom of the water. To sink is to make or allow something to become thoroughly wet by settling it at the bottom of a container with a liquid. To float is to move on or near the surface of a liquid, such as water, without sinking. Some things float on top of water, some things stay submerged partway down, and some things sink. Some things sink very fast, and some things sink very slowly. An object's shape can affect its ability to float, but some materials float no matter what their shape is, such as styrofoam and balsa wood. Some things float at first, but then sink as they absorb water or take water on through holes. Now, open your module on page 14 and answer activity entitled Answer Me. In this activity, you are going to look at the glass with water and tell what happened to the objects inside the glass. You are going to write the letter of the correct answer in your science notebook. Wow! You're so great! You have learned a lot about floating and sinking. Most places you go have some form of waste segregation. Your classroom and homes may have a bin for biodegradable and non-biodegradable waste. But how important is to put the right waste in the right bins? The picture shows how to segregate decaying and non-decaying materials. Our next activity is the decaying and non-decaying found on page 15 of your module. For this activity, you are going to list down the different materials in your home that can be segregated. You're amazing! Segregation of waste is easy and necessary. If you are doing it, encourage your neighbors to do it as well. Materials that undergo decay are biodegradable. Some biodegradable materials decay very fast. These include fruit peelings, seeds, stems of fruits, and vegetables. Your kitchen might be the biggest source of organic waste. Create compost to naturally generate fertilizers for your garden. Materials that do not decay are non-biodegradable or will take a long period of time to decompose with the help of Mother Nature. Examples of these non-biodegradable materials are bottles, plastics, porcelain, glass, and rubber. On page 16, you will find the Let Us Remember part of your module. In this activity, you are going to read the paragraph carefully. You can determine the right answer by solving the given mathematical operations. Again, after honestly answering this, you may check the answers at the last part of this module. This time, let us check how far have you understood our lesson for today. Please turn your module on page 17 and answer "Let us assess" by writing the letter of the correct answer in your science notebook. Once finished, you may check the answers at the last part of this module. Moving on with our session, turn your module on page 19. In this activity entitled Pandora's Box, you will see in the picture that inside the box are properties of matter that you can use. You are going to classify the materials on the ability to absorb and do not absorb water, float, sink, and undergo decay. The whole world is facing right now the crisis of COVID-19 pandemic. Since you are doing your online and modular home study, you can also help the household chores. In your own little way, how can you help overcome this health crisis in your home? For your final activity, answer the questions found on "Let us reflect" on page 20 of your module. Take note that your answers will be rated in the given rubrics. I am sure that this day has been a fruitful one because we have learned something new. This only proves that not even COVID-19 can stop us from learning. Again, I am your teacher for this session. I'm Jonathan A. Urgel, and this is TV Eskwela, sa pag-aaral sama-sama, where education continues at your respective televisions. Bye for now, and stay safe!